Hello and welcome to another episode of the Wolf Catholic Podcast. I am your host, Sean Stassi, the campus minister at the Catholic Center of the University of West Georgia, joined as always by Father G. Father G, how are you doing today, man?
I am doing well. We're recording this Thursday afternoon, and it's that time of the day, so I've got my cup of Indian masala tea. Hopefully, gonna wake me up.
All right. Well, hopefully, you get full of energy in the middle of this podcast to carry
There
us
you go.
through the final half. So let's expect to see that in the middle of the episode.
How are you doing, Sean?
I'm great. It's Thursday. I did some volunteer work this morning, and then played basketball. And so I'm a little tired, but more physically than like mentally. So mentally, I'm
What
sharp.
What's the volunteer work, real quick?
For the mobile pantry here within the Carroll County area, we basically go to different churches in the parking lot, and we get a massive amount of food from the Atlanta pantry, and we hand it out to local families in need and local organizations to kind of distribute to other people in need. And it's really great. We serve over 300 families every week, and and we take some students out there and do that. So we leave at 8:30 in the morning though, so you got to kind of get up early. But if you're interested in volunteering, let me know.
I'd love to come out with y'all one day. Every time I see it on the group meet, I'm like, I need to put this in my calendar.
Oh,
It's
that
the
would
only
be
way things
great.
happen.
Oh, you'd have a blast, Father. It's amazing. It's so much
Yeah.
fun. The guys there, we've built a rapport, so we mess around with each other, and it's just good fun.
And I have a little more Spanish than you do, so I could actually
That's a
talk to the
lot.
Spanish-speaking families. So,
That's true. Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, I have no clue what's going on there. I just smile and wave.
right. There you
But
go.
anyways, so the topic today, and this is a topic that kind of has popped up in the Bible studies this week, and one that we talked about in our men's Bible study this week extensively. And so it's just fitting that this week it would be this topic, and it's the topic of dating.
Mm,
And it's such a interesting topic in today's world that is kind of going under the radar. And it's very interesting. And this article we're basing it off of is from phys.org, and it's basically talked about by a professor at the University of Colorado. I think he's a professor in marketing. Is that right, Father?
I saw, I think, psychology of marketing or something like
Marketing
that.
psychology. So
Yeah,
so
University of Colorado at Boulder.
right. And so he himself is single, so there may be a little bias to this. But
What does
the
the article
statistics,
say? What does the
yeah.
article say? Yeah.
So basically, the statistics he give are from the Pew Research, which is a
Right.
pretty reliable source.
Hmm.
And the specific one that I'm going to point out is from the U.S. Census Bureau, and it shows that the average age of first marriage is up 3 years for each male and female from just 2000 to 2020.
Right.
And what he says this shows is, he says, this is the quote he uses: what this suggests is people are able to act more on their own desires, wants, needs, and goals. Some people see the decline of marriage to be associated with the decline of society, but I see the opposite. And so basically what he's doing is glorifying people, you know, acting more on their own desires, wants, needs, and goals.
Right.
And so I'll kind of open the floor from there to you, Father. What
Right.
what are your initial thoughts on that and the article in
Yeah.
general?
Sure. I mean, I read that, and there's been a lot of in social science and in religious circles and political circles talking about like the decline of marriage in the United States. I think now it's true that um, the majority of children that are born to parents who are not married. Um, and so there's been a huge shift sociologically in our society about how we understand relationships and marriage, long-term commitment, and what is the best environment in which to raise children. So in that context, yeah, it seems. I mean, as we were saying, before we started recording, this guy is he's a professor of marketing, so his main thing is like, there's this untapped market, and
Mhm.
instead of like saying, oh, single people basically are invisible or we don't cater to them, here's a market where people have the ability to focus on their individual wants and needs, so let's monetize,
Yeah,
and sure, all power to him. He's a marketer.
yeah,
He may be, as a psychologist, he's studying human behavior, but what is, from the traditional classical point of view, a human person has a orientation, a purpose towards something. We're
Mhm.
always tending to something. Yeah.
Mhm.
And we're beings who are not perfect, as in that we're not complete. We come out of the womb completely helpless.
Yeah.
We grow physically, but then we also grow socially, emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually. And so we are moving in this direction. And so what does that mean? And what does that mean, especially about this whole area uh, of the relationship, right? Community and relationship. We talked about friendship. So, what does it mean? The relationship of the erotic desires that people feel,
Mhm.
attraction, physical attraction, and then emotional, and this whole concept of a romantic relationship, right? So,
Right.
yeah. Um, the article doesn't really say it, but I think the I've read that Gen Z, like
Mhm.
people like, well, kids are apparently less sexually active. That's one.
Yeah.
Um, but also like they're not interested in either friendship or relationship or anything
Mm-mm.
because of these things, because of these things.
Yep.
So it's like your whole world is through here, right?
Yep.
So, and of course, with that comes, the whole thing of pornography and like the
Yes.
inability to relate to the opposite sex, all of that. So, yeah, there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And to me, it's dangerous and it's kind of alarming, and it's so
Yeah,
easy to fall into the crowd of just being going through the motions, and then before you know it, you're 35 years old and you have no desire to get married, and you just
right.
feel like you can't because you're too old now, and it's like you're kind of grasping at straws on what to do
Yeah,
in terms of relationships, and it can be isolating, and that leads to
absolutely.
depression, anxiety, and stuff. And so, and well, me and my wife talk about this often, and it's like I think there's a big separation between like people thinking that like you shouldn't talk about your sexual desires or anything, and you should just like keep it out of the loop and just it's out of sight out of mind, don't do it, it's bad, it's evil, yada yada yada. Or you're on the complete opposite where it's like I'm free to do whatever I want, I follow my own desires, I don't really care what happens, what consequences come. Sex is awesome. And so neither of those are necessarily the right view, because as you know, as a priest, the like sexual intercourse is supposed to be a consecration of the sacrament of marriage, right?
Yep.
And like I've had obviously a past before being Christian, and so I know I've fallen into both. Well, really, I've only fallen into the latter part I talked about of just thinking you're free to do what you want, follow your own
Correct.
desires, because you can look up stuff that makes you think that that's right. And same with
Mhm,
pornography, you look up stuff saying, "Oh yeah, it's normal, you should do it, it's healthy," but
mhm.
that is complete like folly. It's
Right.
ridiculous. And knowing what it's like without it, and with a wife that I love, and with everything that comes with that, versus not having that and being out of a marriage and just kind of willy-nilly throwing myself around, like it's a huge difference in happiness and loneliness and
Hmm.
isolation, because you don't feel good after anything, like after any type of act outside of marriage. Like growing up, I never felt good after any of my relationships with women
Hmm.
prior to my wife. And so I think, but it's easy to fall victim to that because of what you see around you, and
Correct.
especially the campus life, right? It's either
Right.
you don't do anything or you're doing everything,
Correct.
and those both can be dangerous.
Yeah, no,
So,
there's I mean, we could I think we should probably a future topic would be to talk really about get a little more in depth about the problem with pornography,
oh,
and
I would love
how do
to do that.
you what is a way to grow out of it, and so on. So we could do that. I'm
Yeah.
curious, two things. One, you said that this topic came up in your men's Bible study. So what were some of the things that came up there? And secondly, um, you alluded a little bit to your own experience, but growing up, what did you think like dating and relationships were about when it came to this whole realm of you know of having a girlfriend, a marriage, or
Mm.
just sexuality in general?
Yeah. So the first question, how it came up in the men's Bible study, is we were just talking. First, we were just talking about how our spring break went, and then we were talking about how Lent's going, and that kind of led to like relationships and dating, and dating went into the sexual relationship, and like, are we dating? Because I was talking to them like, are you guys dating for with the intent of possible marriage, or are you dating with the intent of just the act of sexual intercourse or any type of desires of pleasure?
Sure.
And so that's kind of how that came up. And that I talked about my experience. Some of the other guys talked about their experience, and we have
Mhm.
freshmen too that are kind of talking about their viewpoint of it.
Mhm.
And so it was really good to hear different viewpoints and stuff. So that's kind of how it popped up there, and it was really fruitful. And that actually led into the conversation about pornography and our experience with that. So it was really great to open up. And so, guys out
Good.
there, if you're interested in a men's Bible study, we're doing it on 4:30 on Tuesdays this semester. If you're on our group me, you can see that. We'll post it. So we'd love for you guys to come by. It's at the Catholic Center as well,
Right.
1406 Maple Street.
Right.
Second question,
Yep.
uh, my experience growing up and my viewpoint of dating growing up, especially not in a Christian household or in a Christian mindset at all, um, it was more of a social status thing. Like, so like I would so it started in middle school. Like you make out with a girl and you only do it because so you can tell your friends you did it, and so
Right.
word spreads around that you
Right.
did it, and it's like, oh, look at me, like I'm more of a popular man because I did this with this girl, and that basically extends to high school, except it's further. It's like, did you
Sure.
do this
Yeah.
sexual
Right.
act with this
Particular
girl?
kinds of sexual acts and so on. Right.
Correct, correct. And that's kind of what it is. It's not even like you don't even feel good after the act or during the act or whatever. It's just a social thing. And more that's more so with guys, and it's really sad because the girls get looked down upon for that, but the guys get glorified for it most of the time.
Right.
And that, I think that's also really messed up, but it shouldn't be happening either way. And it's a really toxic mentality to be in,
Hmm.
especially when you figure out that that doesn't make you happy, and even when your friends are affirming you, that leaves you like wondering, is this all there is? Is that it?
Right.
And it's like this isn't really that great, and so then that goes into using pornography to fulfill that desire, and that
Hmm.
leads to you never wanting to even worry about marriage, because why would you? Like, you're good, you're set, like you've experienced what it could be and it's not all it lived up to be, so why try to pursue anything further?
Correct.
And I did all this without believing in God, so I me coming into a relationship with the Lord changed everything, obviously,
Hmm.
because and that started with Rachel, honestly, me experiencing objective love, and after I was baptized is when all that happened. So I don't want to omit that. That's extremely important.
Sure.
But
No.
that was my experience growing up, and my parents had a really bad marriage, and so I didn't have anything to really emulate. And my friends' parents, it was more like the male dominated, and the wife just listened, and so I didn't like that either. So I really didn't have a good I always said I was never going to get married and I was just going to be single all my life. So I get I get the state of mind that all these young
Right.
people are in.
Right.
Um,
You know,
so
I was just listening to a talk, one of the podcasts I follow,
mhm,
where, like, again, this is really again more on the topic of sexuality, but just with porn and with young people, like women are sort of like, they're pressured, peer pressure and so on, to do various things with guys,
yep,
right? Where
yep,
they're completely just the object of
yep,
the fulfillment of pleasure. They're vessel for the
yep,
pleasure of the man.
yep,
um, and it's ironic, this is what sexual liberation is supposed to be, right? That
yeah,
women are liberated now.
yeah,
um, and and it's no wonder that especially you're seeing more and more middle school. That's happening even earlier, but even high school.
mhm,
Like girls just like, well, if this is what sex and dating is about, I don't want anything to do with it, right? And so that, then there's, we can talk some other time about the whole question of
yeah,
sexual identity and gender and so on. But
right,
um, so just, I think there's a couple of things that come to mind that I think will be helpful to just sort of make. So desire is simply something that goes out of us, right? There's desire is an attraction to some good. It's a
right,
good. We're always attracted to what is good,
mhm,
really or otherwise. That's how the world is made. That's how the good Lord created the world. And
yep,
so the question of maturity is to identify and sort of make our desires if you will, line up to what is truly good, and
Yep.
objectively good for us in the long run. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just simple. This doesn't require religion. The question of delayed gratification.
Yep.
If we only live for immediate gratification, so many areas of life we can see that just doesn't work.
Mm-mm.
It just does not work. If
Mm-mm.
you do that with food, it leads to all kinds of problems with your body.
Yep.
Um, and we are very aware of that because there's all kinds of talk about restricting our desire for food, moderating it, and
Mm-hmm.
in a sense, growing in virtue temperance, right? So that you eat food that is healthy, food that is nutritious. You
Yep.
avoid junk food. You avoid different things. You don't, you have some sense of what is nutritious and what is a diet. But when it comes to sexual desire, the word from the world is the exact opposite. Like there is no restriction. You just do whatever feels good. That is
Mm-hmm.
the mentality or the assumption
Yep.
by under which people operate, and it's been conditioned. I saw it in the '90s when I was in college in the late '90s. Um, you know, shows that I enjoyed, like Friends, like it made fornication seem okay, right? It's this normal. So
Yep.
desire in of itself and sexual desire in of itself is really good. Um, what is its object? What is its purpose? What is the meaning of it? Those questions never get asked.
Yep.
And we live under this illusion and really this lie that it can mean whatever we want it to mean. And
Yep.
I don't know that that's really true. As you said, you pursue that path of just pure pleasure, eventually it cloys and you
Yep.
realize you're 30, 40, whatever, and then it's like, hey, what's happened, right? So um like when it comes to dating, I think you brought up something.
Mm-hmm.
I In my experience, like it seems dating is just something you do. At this
Yeah.
time, you have to be in a coupled relationship because that's what it's about. There is a great desire for communion and to know and to be known that the human heart has, and
Mm-hmm.
so you do that. But the secular standards for dating are basically dating is you short circuit so much of intimacy
Mm-hmm.
and actually knowing the person
Yeah.
just by jumping into bed.
Yeah.
Um, and then that is the height, that is the goal of dating, and the nature of the sexual act and the nature of the body itself. This is the teaching of the Catholic Church and really of the Christian tradition, is that it reveals something about who we are, and it's designed for the procreation of life and the union of the spouses in the context of a lifelong commitment,
Yep.
and for believers and Christians in front of God. And so when that's not happening, in a sense, we're lying with our bodies, and there's no wonder that after a while, when the pleasure is like you get bored of it, you
Yep.
get bored of each other, you get tired of each other, there's conflict, you're like, well, we're done. So there's
Yep.
and then you do that again, rinse and repeat. And it's no wonder that people, it's, I want to ask, like, are we really happy? Do we really believe like what's we're fed on the media? Like, are we
Right.
really happy living this way?
Yeah.
And we have this inbuilt desire for happiness, right?
Yeah.
Um, so I really think dating should be, the question is, as you mentioned, is a process of discernment for marriage.
Yes.
Um, and is like, am I ready? Am I mature? Have I worked through my own issues?
Mm-hmm.
Am I at a place of growing in virtue, in good habits, and self knowledge that
Mm-hmm.
I am willing and ready to give myself as a
Mm-hmm.
gift to another person, receive her as a gift?
Yep.
And then I'm going to discern. Like,
Yep.
I'll go on dates. So dating is a way to get to know someone, to
Yep.
see if this is the person that I want to lay my life down to, right? Um, and so in college, maybe I think, yeah, people could date, because I think, yeah, it's an appropriate age to think about it. And,
Yeah.
the average age, college educated urban folks in the United States get married later and later. Marriage
Yeah.
is this, it's like a capstone, a culmination. You get to college, you get grad school, you get a good job, you get stable, and then you get married,
Right.
right? And by that time, you're maybe in your 30s, maybe
Yeah.
older. Biologically, things are less ideal, even though it's quite possible. Whereas until fairly recently, marriage was the beginning of life, right? Adult life, I mean, go back a few generations, came out of high school, you went to war.
Yeah.
Sometimes you came back, you married your high school sweetheart, and you started life together, right? And marriage was the foundation, not a goal at the very end.
Right.
So I think in college it's good to date if that's the attitude. But if it's simply I'm going to have companionship and physical intimacy, and we have no idea where it's going, and then yeah, I don't know that that works. I don't know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and I think that's the culture is more so
yeah,
they just use it for
right.
companionship and to feel loved,
Hmm.
and they feel loved, and the only way they think that they feel loved is if they can have intimacy with someone physically,
Sexual intimacy, right?
sexually, yeah. And so that's also dangerous, right? And like I've been there because you're like, does it really make us happy? And I've been through that, and it really doesn't. And if and I probably would have said back then it did,
Sure.
but I'd been lying just
Right.
so I could seem cool, and I was prideful and egotistical. But
Uh,
now I know true happiness. It literally only comes from Jesus Christ. First off, you have to have Him, and then comes from you know objectively loving the your
right.
wife, and through the sacrament of marriage, consecrating it with that act, and that's a
Yeah.
whole nother experience.
There's a great talk. Jason Everett is
Yes.
and his wife Christina. They're beautiful speakers on the whole topic of chastity. Chastity is misunderstood. Chastity in the world is in as much as it's thought about is simply seen as sexual repression. Right. What you were talking in your earlier, the dichotomy that you played out, it's either complete libertinism, that is, just simply act on whatever desire, like as if you're, as if you're an animal, um,
Yep.
and even animals don't do that, right?
Nope.
Um, or just complete sexual repression, that sexual desire is bad, that any kind of experience, thought, everything is bad, the body is bad, it's dirty, and then somehow magically it becomes okay only when you're married. Like that's a worldview that a lot of people who grew up in very strict Christian households, they grow up with a very, I think, a kind of a distorted view of human sexuality. That's been a
Yep.
temptation in the history of the Christian life, Christian tradition, and Christian church. So sexual desire is good. It's there. It's
Yeah.
God gave it. God made everything that He made and said it was good.
Yep.
Um, and the desire of Adam for Eve is one of the most powerful things there is, and it's how the human person, man and woman, participate in as co-creators with God in creating a new human life that has an eternal destiny. It's amazing. Um, so the this talk by Jason Everett on dating in college. It was given at Seek a few years ago. I'll send you the link so you can put in the case notes.
Yeah.
I listened to it earlier today. It's really good. He's
Yeah.
funny, but it's got some great pointers on what like he basically said, what do girls want guys to do when it comes to dating? And he
Oh,
basically opened it up and asked, and he got, like he said, he got 1,500 responses, 30,000 words in like the first day or something, which
wow.
he culled through and then made into a book. And it's really good. Like, what should dating look like, right?
Hmm.
Um, and I think it'll be helpful. Uh,
Yeah.
the other thing, I think, before you get to dating, I think as you're coming to college and you're starting your studies and you're learning about the world and all the things you're studying, growing in self knowledge, um,
Yeah.
being aware of one's own history, one's own past, one's own family, and good and
Mm.
bad wounds,
Yep.
emotionally, spiritually, growing in relationship with the Lord, and then
Yeah.
growing in the gift of friendship. Friendship
Yeah.
is one of the most underrated and one of the most beautiful things. We talked about it a few podcasts
Yep.
ago, right?
Yep. Yep.
Um, we're made for friendship.
Yep.
Great marriages, when they work because husband and wife are friends, are
Yep.
friends with each other, right? I think Sean, you know this. So
Yeah.
I see how you and Rachel interact, and you're like,
Yeah.
you guys love being around each other,
Yeah.
um, and you talk, you're open, you communicate. Um,
Yeah.
you know that's so college is a time to really um, explore and enjoy the gift of friendship.
Right.
I remember when I entered seminary, I was older at that point. I was in my early 30s. um, our spiritual director said, like, hey, you're going to be here for like 5 or 6 years. Ask the Lord to send you good friends. And that really struck me. right?
Yeah.
It's like, wow, I never thought about that. Like, asking
Yeah.
Jesus to send me good friends. And I did, and he did. I have some tremendous friendships. And
Yeah.
even before, from high school, like
Hmm.
when I was coming out of my shell, I was very introverted and sort of shy growing up.
Hmm.
Um, it was great friendships that really brought me out of myself,
Right.
um, and made me excited about life. You
Yeah.
think about sort of how isolated we live, and we live through our screens. And yes, I think we can connect on, likely. We talked about video game communities and so on,
Yeah.
but dating and friendship, they go hand in hand. Um, and I think this is a great time to college is the time to explore that, and not to think of college as some kind of this, like, to grow in the next sexual escapade.
Hmm.
When at the end of one's life, one's never going to look back and say, "Oh, I am so sad that I did not have every ounce of pleasure that I
Right.
could." Um,
Yeah.
I don't think so. What are the things that really bring meaning? It's relationship, a
Yeah.
relationship with God, a relationship of family and of
Hmm.
friends, children, becoming a parent, a father. Um, all of that, I think, is important.
Yeah.
So I don't know how that sounds.
Yeah. That sounds right on the money, man.
Right.
I always
Um,
say like if you're with the girl and you're dating and you're only grinding it out because you think they're attractive, but you can't be around them for more than an hour, just cut it off. Like it's
right.
not you're not it's not gonna last. It's gonna get
Right.
the looks are gonna become like you're gonna get used to it, and then it's gonna be really bad. So you have to be willing to be around them like you would want to be around your best friend that's of the same sex.
Right.
So your best friend that's a guy, if you don't have like say if my best friend whoever, and if I'm with Rachel and I can't be around Rachel for more than 3 hours, if I can't go on a road trip with her without wanting to pull my hair out, then there's red flags that you can look for. So
Right.
don't just base it all on looks. You gotta be attracted to them, I think, but you also have
Right.
to want to be their friend, like what we're talking about.
Correct. I think it's and relationships are unique. I mean, like, Rachel's like, she loves sports, man.
Oh
you
my god,
know,
best,
so
yo.
it's like a lot of times there's a lot of like those differences sometimes can become very real. Like,
Right.
where women tend to be a little more possessive of their boyfriends or husbands' time and so on. So again, those are things to be worked out and to grow into a relationship that's trusting. Um, and So the other thing I wanted to ask, it's kind of ironic. Hey, I'm a single guy, supposedly, from the point
Oh.
of view of the world, right?
Right.
Um, but the Catholic priesthood is not really
Mm-mm.
about singlehood. It's not
Mm-mm.
about sort of the bachelor lifestyle. We're
Yeah.
called father for a reason,
Yep.
spiritual father
Yep.
to this parish, to the students of the university, and that relationship of love. We are called to walk with Christ's view on the church as our bride, and to love
Yes.
the people as in the person of Christ the head.
Yeah.
Um, and there was a tendency, especially the 60s and 70s, to think about priesthood simply as a job, like from 9 to 5, and then like it's like almost like a profession.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's wrong, man. Priesthood is a
Yeah.
life. We're
Yeah.
ordained as to the sacrament,
Yeah.
through the sacrament of holy orders, to be configured to Christ in a particular way.
Yeah.
Um, and we too need friendship and fraternity.
Yeah.
Um, man is not meant to live alone. Um,
Yeah.
and so, like for me, priestly fraternity, priestly friendships are so important, that sustain me as a priest, even though I live, I'm in rural Georgia, I'm far away from nearby parishes and so on.
Mhm.
But thanks to the modern world, it's easier to stay in touch in many ways.
Yeah.
But we're all meant for some kind of community, ultimately with God, but then made concrete in some way,
Yeah.
um, in a human way, through friendship, and through marriage.
All right. All right. So one more question, then we'll end it with a random
Okay.
question. I'm going to put these two questions that I have down together.
All right.
So, as a priest, what do you think the solution is to this issue of dating? And secondly, why in the first place should young people want to get married and have kids?
Sure. Okay. Um, I think the first one, we have to be creative, and we have to create spaces where it's okay to just be friends with the opposite sex and not be pressured into dating, but also encourage courtship, right?
Right.
Actually courting and teaching folks like what is the way to date in a Christian way, in a Christian
Yeah.
way. And also, the same time, to grow in chastity, which is the integration of one's sexual desire under reason, under God's law.
Yeah.
Right? That's the theory. What that
Yeah.
looks like in concrete is all kinds of things. I mean, the fact that you at your Bible study you're having these conversations, that's a
Yeah.
step, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think to encourage healthy dating and courting relationships at the
Mm-hmm.
Catholic Center, and through other things. So we have to be sort of the vanguard of a change in culture.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The second question is a little more complicated, but really, family is one of the most beautiful things. We all come from a family. Sometimes it's broken, but it's
Mm-hmm.
what brings us into the world.
Yeah.
Um, and in marrying, we get to, as Christians, as Catholics, we're really imitating Christ and his church.
Mm-hmm.
So God makes his love incarnate and makes us holy through the love of this person. Um, it's difficult, it's work, but it is so absolutely worth it.
Yeah.
And Sean,
Yeah.
you have Harlan Ray, you've got Sagan at home.
Yep.
Um, you know what it's like to be a father. You know
Yeah.
what it's like to bring and be responsible for life.
Yeah.
Um, it's it's easy to think, especially in our time when where people are so risk averse, that taking risks only means hurt.
Yeah.
Um, but without that, like, do you live? Like, human life is beautiful. Do you really
Mm-hmm.
live? So go out, take a risk, and do what the Bible says: be fruitful and multiply. Right.
That's right.
So,
Yeah.
okay.
No, yeah, 100%. I'm definitely, I will always, vouch for marriage and parenthood. It's, it's the most amazing thing in this life. There's nothing
Right.
like it. And when you have a
Just
strong foundation with Christ, takes it to the next level. Sorry, go ahead.
before you ask the random question, I just want to just put there, none of this is a judgment on the fact that people have broken marriages, people come from
No.
broken homes, that despite people's best efforts, things don't work out. Life is messy.
Yep.
um, just because things are messy doesn't mean that we still shouldn't have strive for what is good. Strive
Right.
for what is good. And I think the church, especially, has a voice and has the ability to really lead in this realm. By the
Yeah.
church, I don't mean just the teachers, but I mean the church as a community, to
Yeah.
be a witness to those who are suffering through marital crises and divorce and the reality of that, but also a witness to, especially for our young
Hmm.
people who are starting out, like the possibility of a great adventure. Um, and a great adventure that gives the best kind of prize, which
Yeah.
is sanctity,
Yeah.
um, in heaven. Okay,
Yeah.
so
Beautiful. Beautiful. All right. Random question of the day time. So this is kind of a two-parter, but they play together. And this is based on the topic we're talking about. What is your go-to pickup line for Catholic men to use on women? And what would be the first restaurant you take them on a date to?
you're asking a priest this.
That's hey, you had a past.
Let me tell you, my past was not Catholic, so
There was mine. See, but you're a priest. I'm sure you know.
right, right. Oh,
Give us
there's all these cheesy lines you
yeah,
see. Oh
yeah.
my gosh. Oh, nothing comes to mind. Hey, girl, let's go adore the Lord together or something.
Oh my god.
Lord. Um, in Carrollton.
Uh-huh.
I love that Brazilian place, man. Down at on the square, Samba Loca.
Really?
Yeah, they have. I know they're open late, and they like in evenings. They're like more like a bar, but for dinner, they're like kind of fine dining. You're gonna
Hmm.
take a girl on a date, go to a nice place. Go
Yeah,
to a nice
true.
place, right? Put on your best. Put your best foot forward.
Yeah.
and take her out to a place where you can have a meal and talk and get to know each other.
Yes.
Yeah, and
Wow.
don't dress like a hoodie, like like
Yeah.
like a slob. Like, be a man, go out, be elegant, right? You gotta the whole art of wooing a woman, right? Wooing her
Yep.
and winning her heart. You know, um,
Mhm.
gosh, there's something beautiful about that.
Yeah. Samba Loca. You know what's funny is a girl didn't invite me there, but the guy that just sold me a car invited me there.
Sure, I've had all kinds of lunches there. I'm not saying it's a romantic place. It's only a romantic place, but it's certainly nice. So
No, yeah. I've never eaten there though, but I've heard good things about it. I've heard they have
yeah,
good steak.
yeah,
Here,
they
here
do. I like it.
here's a good pickup line. Call me a betrayer, but I'd pay 30 pieces of silver to greet you with a kiss.
Good lord.
If I had a
All right,
bead for every
I think we're over time, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. One more, and then I'll end. If I
Ah,
had a
okay.
bead, if I had a bead for every time I thought of you, I would have a joyful mystery.
Wow. I
So,
don't think these really work. I
so
don't. These are just this is just like pure meme stuff.
this is something you bring up after you get them to agree to go to dinner with you, and then they're
That's right. This
trapped.
is something you laugh about over your date, like when
Right.
you're sharing crazy Catholic memes. Right.
Right. Okay. Maybe we
So,
can get Daniel to edit this down a little bit to where it's sub 30 minutes. He can maybe do a miracle. But if
okay.
not, thank you guys for listening this long and you made it through episode 6. We're trudging along here. I hope you learned something about dating and that it's actually cool to do and not lame. So, that being said, let's end it. And thank you guys so much for listening to another episode of the Wolf Catholic Podcast. We'll see you next week. Have a blessed day.